you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it was for any vaccine that we wanted to make, you would say a vaccine from the time you start to the time it's approved to be safe and effective is several years, 5, 6, 7 years. That's unacceptable for now. So what happened is that as soon as we got the sequence of the virus from the Chinese, we pulled it out of the public database and stuck the gene into a vaccine platform and worked on it literally within a day of when it came out. 65 days later, namely 2 days ago, we gave the first injection to a normal volunteer for a phase 1 trial to see if it's safe. That's the fastest that's ever been done. That's the good news. The challenging news is that even at that rocket speed, it's going to take a few months to show that the initial safety is okay. Then you go into a phase 2 trial, which instead of involving 45 people, which we have in the phase 1 trial, it involves hundreds, if not thousands of people. That will take another 6 to 8 months to even know if it works. So at the fastest we can go, it's going to take a year to a year and a half to know if we have a vaccine that we can use. So apropos of the question you asked me a moment ago, that if we cycle to another season, that's when a vaccine is going to be very relevant. Okay, that's a good question. The initial safety study, Mark, is to see if I inject it in the arm, does it have some sort of idiosyncratic or bad reaction? There's another element to safety, and that is if you vaccinate someone and they make an antibody response and then they get exposed and infected, does the response that you induce actually enhance the infection and make it worse? And the only way you'll know that is if you do an extended study, not in a normal volunteer who has no risk of infection, but in people who are out there in a risk situation. This would not be the first time, if it happened, that a vaccine that looked good in initial safety actually made people worse. There was the history of the respiratory syncytial virus vaccine in children, which paradoxically made the children worse. One of the HIV vaccines that we tested several years ago actually made individuals more likely to get infected. So you can't just go out there and give it unless you feel that in the field, when someone is getting infected and exposed, being vaccinated doesn't make them worse. That's why you got to do a trial. Well, it's a great question because it's exactly happening, and I like the strategy. So there are a number of already approved drugs or drugs that have been developed but almost approved, not quite approved, that are now being looked at because of initial either in vitro or animal data work suggesting that they may be helpful. Give you some examples. There's a drug called remdesivir, which is a drug that was developed by Gilead as an antiviral. We tried it in Ebola. It didn't work as well as some of the other drugs, but it's there. What we're going to do now is there are clinical trials going on right now, both in China and in the United States, to see if it works. It's likely that one or more of these drugs, and there are several, are going to be out there to see an already developed drug if it can work. Another one is interesting. There's a lot of buzz on the internet about this, and that is a drug called chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, which is a drug that's been approved for decades, very cheap.
Yeah, it's the old malarial drug.
Yeah, used in malaria and used in certain autoimmune diseases like lupus. There's some indication in the test tube that it might have some activity. The FDA said today that they are going to see if we can do some expanded use access, getting people who might want to use it off-label, namely since it's an approved drug. So your point is extremely well taken. One of the immediate ways for treatment is to look at drugs that you want to repurpose. While you're doing that, you want to start developing drugs de novo that are specifically targeted to the coronavirus itself. Those things will go on simultaneously. Well, I think the long-term strategy besides the drug, you have to go with trying to get a vaccine that's really effective. I mean, the history of viral diseases is that if we can get a vaccine, and I'm thinking in two channels, Mark, one, a vaccine for this specific coronavirus, but long-term, just think about it. Since 2002, we've had 3 outbreaks of coronaviruses. SARS, which I mentioned a moment ago, MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and now this novel coronavirus. We should be and are and will be making a universal corona vaccine, which means you can make a vaccine that would be protective against any kind of coronavirus if you get it to make a response that's common to all of them. The same sort of thing that we've been doing for the past couple of years, trying to develop a universal influenza vaccine. To me, that's the best long-term goal for this.